Mike's muted. There we go. Easy peasy. And I have to lean back because obviously the sun is just very bright right now. Sunset time here in the West Coast. So I'm going to do a quick recap like I promised to do on, without taking out my monitor with the mic boom. Going to do a quick recap on the bill. Obviously, it's not great. I think we'll probably kick off by just launching into probably before we go into the whole sort of bill of it and all of the various things that we get to look forward to. You guys can, that's not reversed, right? It's really tripped me out that it's reversed in the YouTube studio, but I'm fairly certain it isn't on the broadcast. So if someone wants to let me know in the chat that the text is not backwards, that would be A-okay. Politics of it, surprising. Everyone thought, myself included, this was really going to be a liberal, God, what is that basketball term for an assist? Layup. There we go. Tells you how much basketball I play. We thought it'd be a layup for Stephen Del Duca. I mean, Marco Mendicino was literally campaigning with this guy on the weekend. And then today he freaking gets him right in the back and gives it a proper twist, man. I mean, Del Duca has been campaigning in Ontario almost expressly with the perspective of actioning the federal Liberals on their promised provincial handgun ban program that we were all expecting this to be. So it's not good, but it's a little bit surprising. This sun is driving me nuts. I'll just got to stay in direct line with my key light. It's driving me a little bit nuts that like this is exactly the opposite of that, because this is the biggest rug pull for Stephen Del Duca. I mean, it's gun owners up here, and then Stephen Del Duca is right below us. Like we're falling on his campaign's corpse, basically. Like you can't make this up that his entire campaign was going to hinge on this provincial handgun ban that the Liberals were going to allow him to do and give him $1 billion for. And they took that out. It's not been discussed too much, but this new Bill C-21 is effectively a recycled version of the previous Bill C-21 with a few things added in and a few things taken out. And one of the things removed is literally that provincial handgun ban component. It's just gone. Obviously, it's also kind of moot given they're doing this whole national handgun freeze thing, which is one step before a ban. You know, you can't buy or sell, and we'll get into the timing of that shortly because we have some good news on that front. They're freezing them so that you can ban them later, but yeah, they totally nuked them on that front. But obviously it leads further credence to the argument that this particular piece of legislation is likely, much like the past Bill C-21, supposed to serve as a bit of a carrot for would-be voters in the next election, because you know this coalition was formed in this government's been around since 2021. They're already about 6 months in or so, a little over thereabouts, I think. I guess about 6 months exactly now into this government. And as everyone that's watched any of the previous political videos I've done knows, I keep beating the drum of the average coalition or minority government lasts about 450 days. In other words, about a year and a half. So they got about a year left. And a lot of people have been talking about spring 2023 as a potential breaking point for this government when we might start to see them falter and the NDP splinter off, or the Liberals leave the NDP behind. Because let's not forget, either one of those groups could go. It's not like the NDP could decide to go because they just have figured out that, you know, Jagmeet's not their guy and they want to change direction. And they want to go in a more blue collar sort of direction. They might split off the Liberals then, but the Liberals could also decide the NDP is potentially a risk, dragging them down. And I mean, I don't see the NDP really adding to their coalition much at this point. They don't really need them for the support. It seems they're not tabling a ton of legislation. This is probably the biggest bill that we've seen from this government and since they were formed, I would say. So that's really interesting. And again, I think to reiterate, serves as some credibility to the notion that this is sort of a carrot bill. They're going to put this out there now when there's only a couple weeks left in the sitting calendar. Like the House rises soon for summer because, you know, who doesn't get the whole summer off, right? Then they'll come back in the fall and they'll debate it. And then probably by spring of next year, when everything dissolves, just like the previous Bill C-21, we'll watch this one fade off into that good night, and they'll tell their voters, you got to vote for us again. If you want to see this gun control come back, or by God, the conservatives will have a handgun in every kitchen and a AR-15 in every pot or something like that. So that was really surprising that they did do that to Del Duca, because, man, it can't be a fun day in that campaign right now. Like, whoa, like, phew, it's bad. So I guess we'll get into the big thing that the bill, obviously, the headline, the handgun freeze, that's what everyone's talking about. The mechanism by which they're doing it, this is, in case you guys haven't seen, this is our website. I tried to put together an article. It doesn't have a lot of my writing in it, but it's a kind of a collection of the major components of the government stuff. We've got links to the actual text of the bill, as well as, so these particular slides here, this is stuff that's provided to media as part of a technical briefing. So this is all information that we were provided once the press conference started. And there's also I don't think a lot of people have seen it, but there's this slide deck down here. We post this on Instagram as well. It's probably the best plain language discussion of the bill that you're going to get, because it's laid out there to sort of show people the basics of what it is without the legalese. So if you guys are confused, that's a great resource. Just find those slides, because you're going to get it straight from the government. And there's already been some erroneous stuff out there about when this handgun ban is going to come in and the mechanism by which, because even Trudeau had said it was going to be, we've frozen the market, blah, blah, blah. It's not frozen. Long story short, the government's document, most recently published, which we found about 4:50 Pacific time this evening, in the government's own comprehensive summary, they include the stipulation these regulations limiting handgun sales are expected to pass in the fall of this year. So, and we were told that in the media briefing that they were expecting between 3 and 6 months. So to get further into it properly now, they did put in a wording in that bill right here that says that a registration certificate for a handgun must not be issued to an individual. In other words, as an individual, you cannot take possession of a handgun legally. If you don't care about getting a registration certificate for your gun because you bought it out of someone's trunk because you're a gangbanger and it's a prohibited Glock, doesn't matter to you because you never needed a certificate in the first place. But for those of us that need those sorts of things, once this law passes and gets royal assent, you will not be able to take possession of a handgun. It's kind of unclear what will happen if you've got handguns and what will happen to those certificates, but that they can't be issued after that. There is an exemption that, or an exception, or rather, we'll get into that. The exception is for anyone that has an authorization to carry, of which there are 2 of those issued for the protection of life, which are like a concealed carry permit in Canada. And this is older. This is a year-old data from the dearly departed Dennis Young, who was master of ATIPs around firearms in Canada, and who we unfortunately lost. But he was a paragon of this stuff, and he actually managed to get the RCMP, pried the information out of him to get to the point where there was 2 of those authorization to carry for the protection of life issued in Canada. The vast majority of them are for work. In other words, armored car guards, those sorts of folks. There are some other folks, prospectors and trappers, if you've got a recreational or a property that you're prospecting up north. And those are issued simply because if you're working with your hands, you can't really get to a shotgun, so you probably need a gun. Those folks will be exempted from this. They can still buy and acquire guns, and they can also import them. There's a second exemption for elite athletes. Now, that was asked in the technical briefing as well, and defined as, unfortunately, people participating in the Olympic shooting sports. They were very specific about the Olympics. So it will not cover IPSC or anything else. It's Olympians only. And again, we're not super surprised to see that, because for some reason they view the Olympic sports as extra special. All the other sports can get turfed, apparently. So those are the 2 exemptions to that. There is an additional component that also bans the importation. And they've done that again by just saying you can't get a transport certificate to get from a port of entry to anywhere else in Canada. You can't do it as an individual. So again, really super simple mechanisms by which they're going to restrict this stuff. Here's where it gets complicated. Earlier, people were talking about this being potentially an OIC issue, order in council, like the old assault rifle ban, where they just kind of deliver it like a presidential decree and it's over. It is not that. These particular documents here were also furnished to media here. And you can actually see on it right here, prohibit all handgun transfers to individuals, royal assent, not OIC. That means that that particular component of this bill, that provision, will go through the regular legislative procedure. So 3 readings in the House of Commons, including committee. It goes first reading, second reading, committee, third reading. Then it'll go in the Senate, and it'll repeat that same process. And only after it has successfully completed both of those, it will receive royal assent. And then this will become codified in law. And then you will not be able to have a handgun transferred to your name. Now, since, as you just heard, the people that weren't around at the beginning, this bill does seem like a carrot bill that will probably, unless they really hammer on it, because they're breaking for the summer break within a couple weeks here, and there's only a handful of days left in the sitting calendar for the Parliament, that you could kind of go, well, they'll never get royal assent in that case. But unfortunately, it's not that good. Well, when we were in the media briefing again, they brought up that they published the bill, but, and this is going to get confusing for folks, they published the bill. That's what we've all seen. That's this stuff. Concurrent to that, simultaneously today, they also tabled regulations. And that's a separate document. Regulations go through a separate process. It's still legislation, sort of technically-ish, but it's sort of different. So we haven't seen the regulations. They referenced them in this media thing. They actually said that the regulations are tabled, and there are steps in those regulations to curtail a buying splurge of guys going out and being, oh, I'm going to get all my handguns now. We tried to ask some pretty pointed questions. I even went straight down to the, like, look, can someone buy a gun tomorrow? And they said, yeah, as long as nothing gets royal assent, which is the weirdest answer and most non-committal and frightening I've heard. But they have clarified that now to say that those regulations that will effectively bring this freeze into effect will not become law until fall of 2022. And again, if you guys want to reference, this is our website. It's the article at the top, and we have links about the bottom here. That can be found right here in case anyone's wondering. It says it right here. Expected in fall of 2022. So we do have some time here. It's going to be interesting because within the industry, of course, should you bring guns in? I mean, working in the gun industry has always been a bit of a gamble. Is a shotgun considered a long gun? We'll get to the magazine stuff right after this, and only take a sec. Long story short, yes. It'll be interesting to see businesses because it's a bit of the roll of the dice, right? Do you bring in a bunch of guns? Because when will they arrive? A lot of guys never know because we get stuff from the States kind of irregularly. So you really don't want to order like $500,000 worth of handguns to your store and then have them pass this regulation 3 days before because you're absolutely hosed, right? So it will be interesting to see what happens in the market. First blush opinion, and again, this is just an opinion of someone that writes about this stuff. I don't sell guns, never have. Prices are probably going to go up. That's the reality. I don't think we're going to see tons of importation per se, but what's out there is going to get really valuable, I suspect. So that's going to be interesting. Now on to the magazine stuff. We'll deal with the other stuff later because someone asked. That's also update regulations on cartridge magazines as an OIC. Now, that they did bring up in the briefing as well, and a lot of people asked questions. It's going to be a future regulation. It was not included in the regulations that they tabled today, we were told. We were told to reference them as senior government officials, stipulated that the government is still working on these regulations for magazines specifically. And he sounded, if I can be so bold as to kind of try and communicate the tone, he sounded as if it was a work in progress, in the way of we're working on it hard. But what was interesting is the journalist that asked the question, I believe it was actually from the CBC, if I'm not mistaken. He used the example, or no, it was, I believe, the Wall Street Journal, nonetheless. He actually used the example of a Lee Enfield, saying that a Lee Enfield magazine, he asked, are these magazine capacity limits of 5 rounds going to be limited to semi-automatic rifles only? Because the Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle is a 10-round magazine. That is the question he asked, paraphrasing it. The answer was, we're still working on them, so we can't really say too much, but that the government has made it clear that they want these magazine restrictions to capture all long gun magazines. Doesn't matter what the action is, and I don't think it matters what the caliber is. So there's going to be some big losers in there. Shotguns, I don't even know, like lever action rifles. You guys that have watched any of the old videos where we talked about this magazine capacity, like they can't be altered. The alterations made to the magazines as all of these promises have been laid out. All of these regulations stipulate that the magazines have to be modified in such a way that they cannot be altered back to their previous capacity. So, I mean, shotgun tubular magazines, lever action tubular magazines. I got a Mauser, a K-31 back there. Like those are, I don't even know how. It's problematic, any of the revolver magazines. I don't know. You weld up one of the cylinders. Like what do you do? No one knows, but they made it pretty clear that no, it's going to be everything. If it includes the Lee Enfield, I would be shocked if it didn't include absolutely everything. But again, that is a future regulation. The scary part is a little bit of seeing that in the OIC column does mean a little bit like they're not going to announce when that happens. It'll just happen, and then that'll be it. You can't do much. Also, to that end, this bill does include there was some language in the summary and stuff that makes it pretty clear this bill is looking to, and in the future, limit the sale and transfer of magazines. So reading between the lines there, if there's magazines that you want, those probably won't be available for sale in the future, because that was in reference to a question about LAR-15 magazines and stuff like that. They're going to try and limit the sale and transfer of those sorts of things as well. So again, they might not be as available down the road as they are today, perhaps, if you want to go that route. Other than that, the bill is generally a lot of what C-21 originally was. There's the new red flag stuff, which is really concerning from a privacy perspective. Anyone can kind of call and say that you're a risk. And then, yeah, it's pretty frustrating, guys. I don't know what to do. Like, if you see me laughing, it's only because I don't know what else to do at this point. I've been arguing with these people about this stuff for 7 years. And the most frustrating part, I'd say at this point, is that I did a media interview today with CKNW with it. The host pretty much opened the interview with, "This sounds like it's not going to do anything other than make licensed gun owners' lives worse." And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. And no one knows what to do. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow, there's another journalist called Terry Glavin. He writes a lot about a whole ton of political issues. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said it's not even that it seems like the truth doesn't matter anymore. It's almost that everyone knows it doesn't matter and no one cares. Like, everyone knows. When I was in that media interview, there was me, Brian Lilly, the Toronto Sun, even the CBC was kind of like, this doesn't sound like it's going to do a whole lot to stop criminals. Like, everyone was on that bandwagon. And I'll be honest, the senior government staff were just laughing at us, like, straight up. Because I said, this doesn't sound like it's going to do anything. And I said very specifically the wording of the handgun bill that says you can't obtain an ATT to bring one in, and you can't get a registration certificate. The wording of that means that the only people that would be able to get registration certificates previously that are barred from them now are guys like us that have these things. So, it only affects us. And they just laughed, and they couldn't answer that when they said, so is it really going to affect criminals? And it was just laughter. And I can't really answer that. That's the attitude. It's brutal. And I don't know what to do. So, there's some other stuff in there that's not great either. Like, for example, if you guys have been around for a while, we obviously had a debacle a long time ago with the Swiss Arms. Thank you so much, Omega Kraz, thank you. I do try. We did have the Swiss Arms and CZ858s be prohibited, and then we had Stephen Blaney walk that back, and that created a lot of stir within some hardcore anti-gun camps that things can only go one direction because God knows the government never makes a mistake, and they're looking at literally getting rid of that ability. So, if they do repeal this component here, it says repeal governor and council ability to downgrade firearms classifications. The governor and council is the Minister of Public Safety in this case, or whomever she appoints that power to. If they get rid of that, whoever says this gun is a prohib, you never get the option to take it back. Like, it's literally saying the government can't make a mistake. Guns can only be considered more dangerous. They can never make a mistake. It's insane to me. And it's further proof this is just a lot of political theater because none of it makes sense. There was a little other stuff. We'll scroll down here because I've been going through this so much today. I'm losing my head here. So yeah, the two components of C-21 that they removed was obviously what we talked about earlier. The Stephen Del Duca provincial handgun ban component is just gone. that whole $1 billion for every province that wants to buy handguns and a federal legislative framework that they can hang that handgun ban on is gone. So, Stephen Del Duca, you are up the creek without a paddle, and no one is sad about it. The other component that it takes away, unfortunately, is the non-permissive storage component that was going to be the buyback isn't mandatory. You could keep your gun long-term in a non-permissive way where you don't get to do anything with it, but it can just take up space in your gun safe if you want it to, in the hopes that a new government will one day let you shoot it again. They're getting rid of that, which is the fulfillment of the Liberal promise to make the buyback mandatory. That's all that is there. So not surprising, but still disappointing nonetheless. However, there is still 2 years worth of the amnesty. And as we said earlier, the average minority government lasts about 450 days, which we're already 6 months in, and they issued that 2-year amnesty not long ago. So it's relatively likely that we're going to see a new election before the amnesty expires, and hopefully a new government, because I feel like that's in reality the only way any of this goes away. There are the new red flag laws they've added to it. It's effectively just means that people can just call on you and say, look, we think he's a risk. And unfortunately, it kind of sounds like that's all it takes for you to lose all of your rights against search and seizure. Because with a warrant or without a warrant, they can search your property and take any of it. And what I mean by that is any. When you read the wording of the bill, it quite literally says they can come in and they can just take your stuff. Just because someone said you're a risk and a judge happened to agree, they may or may not issue a warrant, but it doesn't even matter. That's where we're at here. It would seem like if you're a gun owner, you don't have charter rights fundamentally. Nothing Liberals have done towards guns has made a difference towards criminals. No, in fact, shootings have gone up more and more, likely because all of this stuff, and this is something everyone should keep in mind when you're talking about this with your friends, because people don't care about this stuff. Your average person that doesn't have guns, they do not give a crap. Why? Because gas is like $2.20 a liter. Your mortgage is $1 billion, and there's no good jobs to be found. So no one has the mental space in this awkward post-COVID nightmare world we live in to think about this kind of stuff. You got to make them care. The only way to make them care is to make them realize they're part of it. And what I mean by that is this is all really expensive stuff. It's not about the buyback. I mean, that's a huge bill. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about buying these guns back in the first place. There's 2 million handguns in Canada. So I don't think they're buying them back, guys. That's billions and billions and billions of dollars. I frankly don't think the government can afford it. So I wouldn't hold my breath for a buyback on this front, but nonetheless, just enforcing this stuff is huge. There's hundreds of millions of dollars to the CBSA in this, in part of the regulations that we're hoping to get within a couple days. Fingers crossed. I've already emailed a bunch of people in government to try and get my hands on those. I think it was $212 million to the CBSA that they said was for interdiction of firearms for anti-smuggling. But of course, a large component of that is simply enforcement of this stuff. Like there's a component in there that says you can't import ammo anymore. Well, you can't just tell the CBSA, you guys need to enforce this new rule about no importation of ammo without attaching a bill to it, because CBSA officers have to be trained up on the new laws. They have to know what they are. And then you've got to have some sort of system by which they can actually enforce it. Plus, you got to have more CBSA officers if this is going to slow down throughput. So you got to make it about just the cost. And I mean, it's what we brought it up with the long gun registry, and it's ultimately what brought the long gun registry down, because I said in the interview, and I don't know if people think about this much, but like the only tool government has is taxpayer money, our money. They can write legislation, but if they don't have the money to pay the police officers in the judicial branch to enforce that legislation, it's just words on paper. So ultimately, the only tool is money. And when you get down to the base level, they're spending our money on this when no one has a doctor. You know, that's the one thing these days here in Kelowna. There's some other issues here, like our local RCMP establishment detachment has actually disbanded its gang unit or its drug unit because we don't have enough police officers to staff up the drug unit, the gang unit, and a homicide unit. So they've just folded the drug unit completely out and moved them into homicide and gangs. Those are the very real world practical problems that this legislation is creating. So when you say they're not helping. Nothing they've done has helped. It's not even that they're not doing anything. When people say, well, they can't do nothing, nothing would be an improvement over what they're doing, because they've already spent $112 million, in excess of that now, on the office for the buyback that hasn't bought back a single gun. And then the buyback itself is going to be $2 billion or more just in that. Like, so they're literally shooting us all in the foot with this stuff, because it's taking very precious resources that we really can't afford to waste. It honestly would be an improvement. Definitely this will cause a slow death in numerous shooting sports. IPSC. The big concern is actually this could be the death of all of our gun clubs, guys. That's the reality here. Like, if this goes through and you can't buy and sell handguns, right? It's the next step, obviously, is going to be you can't use them. You can't get an ATT, just what they did to the AR-15. And they'll do it by a million cuts, because they'll look for election, for election, for election. And once you can't shoot these guns, well, why belong to a gun club? Because you just go to Crown Land, shoot your non-restricted there. Gun clubs, having been a president of one, most of them survive on restricted firearm owners that have to be members and shoot at a club, because that's where you shoot your handgun. This is the beginning of the end for the gun community in Canada, to be very clear. If we don't stop it somehow, probably by way of a new government. There's no other reality in this. But we can get to that in a little bit. We'll keep going through what it is. So red flag laws, restraining orders. Oh, that's the other one. If you've ever had a restraining order, and this is kind of weird, they don't say charged with domestic violence or stalking or anything. They just say if you've been involved in it or something, like super non-committal. So if you've ever had a restraining order filed against you, or you've been involved in domestic violence, you can't get a PAL now. If you have a PAL and you get a restraining order filed against you, you lose your PAL. It's revoked. It's not suspended. It's revoked. It's gone. Furthermore, when your PAL is revoked, you have to surrender your firearms to a peace officer in the law. It doesn't seem to say anything about being able to send them off to a store or potentially get, yes, they are also going after airsoft guns. Very clear there. So if you have ever had that, it's over, and it just seems like that's the end of that. Now, I mean, no one's going to argue with people that commit domestic violence not being able to own guns. The law currently is that if you are a violent criminal, you can't get a PAL. And I'm honestly I don't really have a huge problem with that. I think eventually you should be able to turn over a new leaf. You know, like if you're 18, you got in a bar fight, and you're 35 now, and you've got kids, you moved on, different story. That's where there's problems with that limitless background check that they've also introduced. But, you know, if you've got guns and you also beat your wife, you should not have guns. You should not be your wife. Both of these things should stop. But, you know, now with this weird wording that they've got, again, it's very nebulous. It's very much like the wording around if someone reports you and if the judge thinks you're a threat, there is no clear language that says this is what a threat is. And if you are that, then you can't have guns. It's just, oh, if this guy thinks you're a threat, well, you probably shouldn't have guns. And that's so subjective. I mean, we all know how you don't even need to go into it. It's so problematic. And then this is the big thing where they go into the future of the magazine stuff, where, as we discussed, they are going to go after absolutely everything. In terms of how to stop this, honestly, the big thing is just wait for the election. It's kind of all we can do at this point. Hopefully it happens in 2023. If the one thing I'll say is, and because I know that, you know, in the gun community, everyone votes CPC because it is honestly the only chance of having a government that will overturn this stuff is the CPC. We have fought the split vote PPC thing in the past. It obviously never works, so please stop doing that. But I would personally love it if guns would become a nonpartisan issue, because I think it would be the healthiest thing for all of Canada if we could move past this position of guns as political theater, or guns as effectively what Trudeau has done is to get into the very specifics of it for your political nerds out there. Justin Trudeau and his campaign is incredibly vote efficient. And what that means is they're very good at understanding specifically what ridings they need to win and what policies they need to promise to win those ridings. So when he won his majority, everyone talks about, oh, he won a massive majority in 2015. Yeah, he had a huge amount of votes come out. It was an outlier amount because it was basically kind of a Kennedy type figure. But every concurrent election after that, he's really kind of whittled away. And as we said, even Andrew Scheer got more votes than Justin Trudeau, but Justin Trudeau was delivered into government, into the PMO's office, because his campaign was efficient. He didn't just get a lot of people to vote for him. He got the people to vote for him in the areas he needed to so that he could get the riding, right? You could win all of Alberta, as we all know. The Conservatives can win the entire province of Alberta from north to south, most of Saskatchewan, and pretty much all of BC if you ignore the bottom coastal part. But the CPC still won't win the actual election because you need to have that efficiency. That efficiency comes from being micro-targeted. He literally, Tom Pitfield he was a friend of Justin Trudeau, still is. I believe he was actually a best man at his wedding. And he's the guy, the data brain behind Justin Trudeau's campaigns that helps him do this. And he's a master of micro-targeting and social media stuff. So he works in that world, and they have found, obviously, that their electoral math makes guns their linchpin. It gives them the ridings they need. This is the argument that plays well, that gives them the ridings they need to win. That's why they're doing this. So the only ways to get around it is, like I said, to do two things. One, make it about other people's problems. Point out that, yeah, sure, you're losing guns and you can't take a hand, can't shoot this, and it sucks. But the bigger issue is the cost and what it is preventing the government from being able to otherwise fund. Like I said, everyone would like to have a doctor these days, but no one can find one. Why? Because we don't have any money. We don't have enough hospital beds. We need more X-ray machines. We need more MRI machines. We need more ultrasound machines. We need mental health facilities. You can't get into one. If you've got a serious mental problem or an addiction issue, it's almost impossible to get government support these days. Why? Because Justin Trudeau spends his time standing up and talking about this kind of BS, So hammer on those things, because that's the stuff that resounds. And more importantly, it's actually important, guys. Like, this is the stuff that actually matters. Don't fall into the trap of playing the victim and saying, oh, this is all wrong because I can't shoot my guns. Yeah, it sucks for us. It is wrong. But the larger issue is who else is losing. Because the fact is, most of us that own guns, we have enough disposable income to look after ourselves and keep our families safe most of the time. But what is being taken away from us is coming at the expense of people that don't have our opportunities. It's people that really could use it. Incoming call. Actually, I'm getting a call from the guy that owns Canadian Access Firearms, which is an excellent publication as well. If you're looking for a good buy and sell for guns, that's another one to go to, but I'm not going to answer that right now. The other thing that we need to do is probably start reaching out. If you're an NDP type guy or a member of that party, reach out to them. Like, holy crap. Like, the NDP back when Jack Layton was around was not an actual, they were a bit anti-gun under the surface, but it wasn't this overt anti-gun party they are now. And Jagmeet Singh has parachuted in a ton of members. He recruited a ton of these new, younger, neophyte kind of, dare I say, super left-wing members to the NDP that have steered that party largely in that direction to its detriment. Because in those ridings, they just can't win. The NDP can't compete with the Liberals in places like downtown Toronto, downtown Vancouver, but they're trying to by also becoming their lapdog. So now is a great time to start putting pressure on your NDP MP to say, look, I'm done with this. I like you guys and all, but unless you change your tack, and this is a very real way that you can say, look, guys, like, this is a policy you got to change on. Maybe we can actually get some traction that way. Because the other thing is, if they start to get some dissent against this stuff from within the House, it could slow down. Like, the Liberals can push this through, sure, yeah, but they're a minority. And this is I think a lot of people were surprised by how broad and sweeping this is. So I think it's caught a lot of people off guard. And I think within caucuses, like, for example, right here in the Okanagan, the Kelowna riding is conservative, West Kelowna is conservative, but South Okanagan is an NDP riding. Richard Canning runs it, nice guy. Wins by a small margin every election, super small. I'm sure he looks at this and goes, geez, this is not good for my future employment prospects. If the NDP were to come around and say, no, this is wrong. Look, these people, like, this bill, 95% of this bill targets explicitly people that get daily criminal record checks, so by default are the definition of not criminals. It's pretty easy to say, yeah, no, this isn't the problem. This bill is all wrong. You need to start rephrasing this. And who knows, maybe it actually gets somewhere. I doubt it, because the Liberals haven't reformed a bill significantly in the beginning. What happens to airsoft guns after they become prohibited? Well, they're just prohibited. Can't use them. Just like everyone else has got a prohibited gun they can't use. to get into that, we'll just go straight into it. We can find the airsoft component. We'll go down to here because this will be the easiest thing to look. Let's see. Oh, it's not in there. Expanded license revocation, combat firearms. Yeah, there we go. Air guns. So this is the interesting thing. Closely resemble a real firearm replica and discharge a projectile velocity between 366 and 500. So it used to be if you had an airsoft gun or a BB gun, as long as the FPS was below 500 feet per second, it was considered a BB. It wasn't a gun. It was a BB gun. So it was no big deal. They've changed that now to, they now consider them mid-power. They've referred to that a little bit. Can you keep your airsoft USP? Depends. Do you own an airsoft USP? That's kind of how that works, to be totally honest. Will airsoft? No, I don't think there's no wording here for grandfathering, unfortunately. I would not be super optimistic about airsoft gun futures. But again, this is something where if you start hammering on your MP, even if they're a freaking liberal, and say, look, like it's a freaking BB gun, dude. Like, you're really gonna throw me in jail over a BB gun? Obviously, now to be clear, this is being pushed quite strongly by probably the law enforcement community, because there has been a significant problem with replica air guns. Because you'll note it's closely resemble a real firearm. So I'm sure if you do the orange tip thing, it's probably enough to qualify as not resembling. Because they're having a real problem with criminals using replica airsoft guns to literally like commit crimes. I was actually way back. It was kind of funny. I actually got called into jury duty for a crime where a guy used an airsoft gun to try and rob two girls, and he shot them with her. And that was, well, it was an airsoft gun, so it wasn't a tragedy. It was just a bruise, but he ended up on assault charges for that. And I almost ended up on that jury duty. So they're trying to combat that with that law. But again, you know, I would say that the majority of people with replica airsoft guns, the Tokyo Marui type stuff out there that looks really cool and costs a ton of money, are not people that are robbing other people. It's the cheapo Crossmans that get, you know, lifted from Canadian Tire that could pass for a 1911 from 50 feet away that are causing more of a problem. So that's about it. Any other questions? I'm gonna crack this one off at 7 o'clock because it's been a long day and I'm gonna go spend some time with my family, but I'm gonna sit for a few more minutes and take some questions. Would you have to surrender your airsoft gun? I don't know. There hasn't been a lot of mention of what happens to them. Yeah, I mean, technically you would, I suppose, because if the law passes and gets royal assent, and they do, let's say you've got a gun that shoots between 366 and 500, you would be in possession of a prohibited device. So just like if you, it would, I mean, technically speaking, from a legal perspective, it'd be no different than if you had a suppressor or a 30 round mag. It's a prohibited device. I guess it would be a prohibited firearm technically, because they would be, I think they're calling them firearms in that particular case. But yeah, I would assume that you would have to. Anyone else notice shortly after the T-Rex arms legal airsoft video came out, airsoft? I wouldn't blame T-Rex arms for that. There are other things I blame it for, perhaps, but no, this has been a pretty well-known issue. This goes back, like even back in the Stephen Blaney days, there was a lot of discussion about like, what are we going to do with these replica firearms? Because there is a significant problem for law enforcement. And I haven't read it yet, but permanent mod of long guns in there. I'm thinking Enfield and lever guns shoot smaller caliber. Nope. As we said earlier, someone actually asked that. Like I said, I think it was I really do think it was the Wall Street Journal journalist, because I remember thinking that's surprising. He really knew his stuff. That he used the Lee Enfield 10-round magazine as literally the example of a 10-round magazine. And he said, is that magazine capacity regulation that isn't written yet, but will be shortly, is it going to be limited to semi-automatic rifles only? And the government response was, it will not be limited to semi-automatic rifles only, and it will include the Lee Enfield. The government is keen to really include all long gun magazines in that. So I would expect all long guns, shotguns, 22s, revolver rifles, lever action guns, all that stuff is probably going to be in there. But again, that's the magazine regulation that has not been released yet. We're still waiting on, for those that are coming, because I see there's more now, we're still waiting on the regulation that is about the handgun ban. That's tabled. They've put it out there. The government has it. When it was frustrating because we were in the briefing. They were referencing that they were looking at the regulation in front of them, and the regulation being separate from the bill that is going to stop us from buying handguns and stuff. But that'll be passing in fall of 2022. That's when they'll be bringing in this up here. It says that's when you'll have to stop buying handguns. Fall of 2022. Yeah. So, any other questions, guys? I'm here for 10 more minutes, and then I'm gonna go eat some dinner. The 22s, come on. I know, right? Like, are there any 5-round mags for 22s? Like, realistically? Like Ruger 1022s, or even my Savage Mark II, I think, is a 10-rounder. I guess the only ones would be like the Cooey single shots that spring to mind. I think even my Cooey repeater is, I think, a 6-rounder. I mean, the Cooey repeater that I definitely don't own anymore. Oh. Yellow flag lock. CZ is, oh yeah, CZ does have a fine rounder. That's right. Yeah, Savage has some 5 rounds, even Britain and Australia. Britain and Australia, honestly, these laws are, part of me wonders a little bit about how well planned this was, because to be totally honest, when we were going through some of the briefing stuff, there was not the sense of a tremendous amount. There was not a sense of a wealth of knowledge on this particular subject. Really getting down into the very nitty gritty of, is this going to stop criminals? There was a lot of dancing around stuff, obviously. But you didn't get the impression that there was a lot of knowledge. The other thing I'll say just offhand too, as someone that's been following this for a long time, there's been quite a lot of staff turnover in the Office of Public Safety, between communications staffers, parliamentary staffers, that kind of thing. There's been a lot of turnover. I never thought I'd say I would kind of look back on the good old days when Ralph Goodall was the Minister of Public Safety, but where we're at now is discernibly worse. It's been a steady march down the ladder of competency to land where we are. Am I the only one? What about the warrantless search provisions? They're in there in law. It's dead clear. Just in that red flag stuff, I believe it's up here. Anyone able to make an application to the court for an emergency weapons prohibition order, red flag, to immediately remove firearms for 30 days from an individual, blah, blah, blah. Once you have that fired, once you've got that filed against you, they'll come and take your guns for 30 days. Then you can actually get a whole bunch of other stuff passed where the warrantless search and seizure comes in. That's in the formal wording of the law, which you can again head over to our site. This is the full text here. For those that haven't seen it yet, this is the full bill. These are all the areas that it goes through. Criminal code. So the very beginning of it here that you get through, this is all of the, altering cartridge magazine. So this is like right here is what's confusing a lot of people. Every person commits an offense who, without lawful excuse, alters a cartridge magazine that is not a prohibited device, so that it becomes a prohibited device. This is because that regulation is coming out to limit the magazine capacities later. This is the law that supports that. This is the law that says you got to do what the regulation says. Then they're going to show us the regulation later. They did that when they brought in the initial Firearms Act too. They said, oh, we're going to make a bunch of guns prohibited and restricted. And then later, like, here's the list of them. So they're kind of doing the same thing there. This here is where, I'll be honest, you're better off waiting for Ian Runkle's very probably excellent takedown of this whole bill, because the criminal component of this, like warrant to search and seizure without a warrant, if in respect to a person who is subject to an order, blah, 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 is made under subsection 3. I don't particularly speak that language super well. I can muddle my way through it, but it'll be a bit painful for all involved. But long story short, it's right there in black and white: search and seizure without warrant. But here's the really scary part of that. Search for and seize any such thing and any authorization, license, or registration certificate relating to such thing that is held by or in possession of that person. So if they don't think, if it would not be practicable to obtain a warrant, then they'll just do it. Like, oh, if we can't get a warrant, we'll just search and seize your stuff anyways, is what that literally says. Runkle's going to have scotch and no glass. Yeah, he'll just have the bottle. It'll be a 40-pounder for this thing. I also be very curious to see what he says about the legality and there's always a case in law. Lawyers are interesting because you always have to be cognizant that, like, 2 always enter a room, and much like Thunderdome, 1 leaves. So it's always 1 versus 1. There's always 2 opinions, and this is one legal opinion. They say, the law says you can do this, but there's going to be a court out there that might get asked the question, is this actually legal? Basically, your liberal neighbor can say you're a bad guy and buy guns. Yeah, pretty much. It kind of seems that way. Is cross industry toast then? I don't know. I think they're doing some export business. A lot of the gun companies in Canada either do or should shift to a lot of export industry, not only because of this law, but honestly, because there's like 100 times more people. There are more gun owners in America than there are people in Canada. Unfortunately, I made the silly decision of making a specifically Canadian gun magazine that is of little interest to Americans. But if I had made guns or anything else, there's no way in God's green earth I wouldn't be exporting that stuff. Sounds like my neighbor can complain about my guns and the police can take my guitar. Well, it says, so if the grounds for obtaining a warrant under subsection 5 exist, but by reason of possible danger to the safety of the person or any other person, it would not be practical to obtain a warrant, search for and seize any such thing and any authorization. So any such thing, that's where Runkle probably will be able to clarify. I would assume that to mean pursuant to the firearms prohibition order. I would guess. But who knows? So just to reiterate, because I am going to get out of here soon, if you guys want, I tried to put together the most comprehensive thing. This is on our website, calibermag.ca. It's the top story, and I've got literally just everything. I tried to put all the government documentation together, and obviously all of that. These are the slides. Again, if you want to get this is the actual the PowerPoint presentation that the government prepared for the actual law. It's kind of plain language. So if you want to know what it says without really having to get into it too much, that's the Zoom button. Just head over to our website, and then that's the article that you want. It's going to be all the links and stuff. And I'm going to keep updating this. So I'm going to try and keep this as like a living document of C-21 information. So like, for example, when Ian's video comes out, I'm going to try and link that at the bottom, because I want to make sure that all of the information pertaining to this bill is in one spot that everyone can reference. Seems like RPAL courses will dry up since so few would ever need one. Leaves restricted short barrel rifles and shotguns. It does leave short barreled rifles, shotguns in a strange limbo. I assume the RPAL will still be there. And I mean, if anyone's out there that that wants a handgun, they got to get their pal Ricky Tick, because like they don't exactly hand those things out quickly these days. It's all a political game for a little smoke and mirror spreading. Yeah, it's total misinformation, man. Like this is all complete BS. Like and it was somewhat gratifying to see like so much of the media see that. I'll be honest, having done this for so long, that's also something that has shifted. If you're looking for good things to take away from this, that you go like, oh, it's not all over. It's a bill. It's got it. This particular part of the bill, this whole C-21 matzo ball of crap, has to go through 3 readings in the House, 3 in the Senate, and throughout all of those, you better believe that we'll be trying really hard to put as much pressure on politicians as we can in very real ways. Gun vote's got a lot of stuff coming out. Don't want to get ahead of myself a little bit, but I've managed to get geolocated data on every single gun owner out there. Not your exact address, but close enough that I can tell what riding you're in, which is very valuable information. And we're already working with some polling companies to put that information into riding areas, so we can actually come up with a map of accessible ridings based on the gun vote. Hence why we've always called it gun vote, because it's been our goal. And we're also going to be pulling on policy stuff so that we can basically do what the Liberals are doing in reverse and start to see not where does anti-gun stuff win, but where does pro-gun stuff win? What kind of arguments win in those areas, so that we can start to sway these discussions in very real ways and put real pressure on. Like, for example, Marco Mendicino's own riding, he has been doing this. He won by a pretty decent margin. I believe 6,000 votes in the first one, or most recent one. Long story short, we estimate that we need between 4,000 and 6,000 votes in his riding to get rid of him. That's a riding of, I believe, 60 to 80,000 electors. That's 4,000 to 6,000 people. It's 10%. It's a decent chunk, but is it attainable? Well, once we find out how many gun owners live there, I'll tell you. And once we know, it'll be a lot easier for us to get to them, because if you have guns, well, my expertise is knowing how to reach you, usually by mail, because most of us are old. So we're really working on all that. So we're really going to be pushing hard and trying to give you guys really effective tools to also push, not just rabble rouse and tweet and Facebook and social media, but very real ways of send this letter to MPs, because they will know what they're reading and understand between the lines the risk that this legislation poses to them and their job. And it's been really gratifying as that, because now seeing the media finally transition to that. Well, it's true that the media appears to be slowly seeing through the BS, but where are the hard questions in public? Oh, trust me. I mean, sitting through these press conferences on the dial tone phone there, waiting to ask questions and listening to journalist after journalist after journalist ask a question, get a complete non-answer, and then just move on. Like it, oh yeah, okay, thank you. Like, no, I don't get it. I don't, but I mean, I'm a pretty abrasive guy. I kind of like that. So I'm a bit different. I don't know. Maybe it's just difference. I think there's a lot of younger people in journalism, and it's a very, very hard industry to make a living in. And in the modern world, to be honest, there's a lot of, it's hard to be an abrasive individual, such as you should be if you're a good journalist. You can't, as a journalist, you can't really have a lot of friends, because you can't be friends and cover people. The journalists that I look up to have said things like, you can't have friends amongst politicians and also be reporting on them. It's a conflict of interest. They should kind of not like you all of the time. They should always view you critically and a little bit cautiously. Whereas now it's shifted a lot. A lot of these journalist-politician relationships are very amicable, because the journalists are used by politicians to advance messaging. And then, of course, it's not necessarily about the $600 million kickback. Journalists don't know about that. They don't see it. It's not like they got money, their bosses did, and not a lot of it trickled down. Journalists are not well paid. It just comes out in the way of, it's just easier. It's a way easier way to go. I mean, in my world, for example, I'm a pretty abrasive guy, and I don't really BS. And as a result, you don't see a lot of caliber stuff being shared by some other people, even within our own community, because I don't make a lot of friends with the people that I have to cover, because it's not my job. So great segue for me to end off with. We rely on you guys subscribing. That's what keeps us going. We are, that's literally it, is subscribers. So if you guys want to support us, head over to our website, take a gander through the big old article there. Like I said, I'll keep this article updated as new information comes out. You'll notice if something is updated, we put it in these italics right there. So if you're wondering, that's the demarcation of new information. So as we learn new stuff, it'll go in there. And I'll keep floating it up there on Facebook if anything relevant comes out. I don't expect to get anything relevant until the regulations come out. That'll be the big thing. And that'll probably be, I'm hoping, Wednesday or Thursday, hopefully at the soonest. And once we have our hands on those regulations, we'll post them up there as well. They'll have some interesting stuff, because they were a bit cagey about it in the interview. So I'm really interested to see what they have. But we'll get those sometime, I think, this week. And yeah, if you like that, head over. There's a button up there, right up here. It says subscribe. That's really great. When you click on that, it's $30. We'll send you 6 magazines. We're looking at taking Patreon as well, to break it down into like a $5 an issue or $10 an issue or something like that. Can't remember how much we're going to do it. You should run for PM if Drams, you could do a circuit. Yeah, I mean, if he can do it, my pet dog could do it if he can do it. But I really don't want to. Honestly, like, I criticize the guy as much as I probably is not enough. I wouldn't want the job. It's not a fun job, I imagine. I've known enough politicians to know it's not a fun job, especially, to be blunt, for those of us out west. It's a 4-hour, 5-hour commuter flight every time he got out there. And I mean, even Stephen Fuhr, who here in Kelowna was when we first moved here, he was a Liberal MP. I bumped into all the time. I was not a big fan of his, but I certainly respected the commitment to the job he had, because it is not easy. I'm thinking city council, maybe. We'll see how that goes, but that's a subject for a different day. So thanks for you guys hanging out. It's been great chatting with you guys as always. If you have any questions, drop them in Facebook or wherever. Just see if I'll be checking up on social media, wherever, Twitter, Facebook. I'm trying to get more on Instagram. I'm a little old for Instagram, even though I don't look it, but I'm trying to. So drop your questions in there. I'm going to try and do more of these videos too. I had some health issues, so I've been dropping off the radar a little bit. That's about the last 4 to 6 months, but I'm coming through now. So hopefully you'll see more of me, and hopefully a little bit less of these guys. That'd be really nice. But and hopefully the next video can be a little bit more fun. But thanks for hanging out. It's been great chatting with you guys. And I hope to see you guys soon. Like I said, we'll be keeping the website updated for more information as you go. Hit share, all that, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.